everybody. Welcome to our webinar. I'm Katie Wagner. I'm the president at KWSM, a digital marketing agency. And I'm here today with a couple of my friends. First, Jeffrey Henning, who is the Chief Research Officer, and Tony Cheevers, who's the Customer Success Officer at ResearchScape, one of my favorite research firms. And today we're going to talk about data-driven marketing, unleashing the power of customer insights. So gentlemen, if it's okay with you, let's jump right in. And Jeffrey, I'm going to start with you. Let's talk about how businesses can use survey data to create detailed buyer personas that go beyond basic demographics.
Yeah, so I think the key thing with surveys is that just because you ask people something doesn't mean that the answer is exactly what they're thinking. And asking, is this important to you? Will typically produce the answer yes. So for instance, we often ask consumers, is the sustainability of the products you buy, is that important to you? And they'll say, oh yes, that's very important. And then you'll have them rank things that are important to them. And they're going to rank the brand, the price, product features. They're going to rank 5 things before they get to sustainability. So I think it's important that you don't look at things in isolation. You have them compare the different things and basically rank them together. And so there's a number of ways that you can do that. One is just say, rank these in order of importance, from most important to least important. So that's called a force rank question. And that's actually a very simple, powerful technique. You can see, we have an example for smartphones, and you can see that, there's a price segment, and what they care about is different than others. There's a segment that it has to be an Android, that's their number one, or it has to be an Apple. And you can see that the Apple folks want a better camera and the Android folks want a better processor. And so you can kind of see these segments that fall out of the ranking data. So, and then there's some things called discrete choice and MACD, which kind of have you rank again and again, where you're ranking sort of 4 things at a time, what's most important, what's least important. But basically, they're all models to have you help figure out how people really prioritize things in the real world, not just saying, yeah, that's important to me.
Yeah, because what you're saying is if you ask them in a vacuum, the answer is different than if you ask them with all that context. Exactly. So how important is how we structure those questions and how we group things?
It's very important. There's people have been asking survey questions, originally grew out of census data, but then they started to use it for market research in the 1910s. And since then, people have been studying how do you ask questions? And there are definitely different respondent behaviors. And so you have to design a questionnaire that kind of recognizes that people, can, have some patterns, superficial thinking, that impact, your answers. And so you definitely want to design your questions, typically with a partner, or nowadays with an AI. There's certainly survey tools that have great AI that will judge your questionnaire to help you work around those issues.
Yeah, and when you're working with a customer on this, how do you help them dive into those pain points and design questions that uncover pain points that allow us to develop solutions for clients?
So the first thing I say is don't just rely on surveys. Hopefully you have some qualitative interviews, you have maybe a customer service log. Hopefully there's different ways that your organization has captured people's complaints and issues that you can then take and think about in terms of the survey. When I first started doing survey research, we would often do qualitative interviews first to make sure that the questionnaire really, is all encompassing and includes what people want. These days, because of the price of that and the speed at which everything moves, we'll often field sort of open-ended questions, depending on your sample size, maybe to 30 or 50 people, and then kind of really read those open ends in detail, some follow-ups to those, to use those to structure, more closed-ended multiple choice questions that you're going to use going forward.
Okay, so it's sometimes not a one survey and we're done kind of process.
No, definitely not one survey and you're done. Yeah. And I think sometimes pain points are there. It's just not all of your customers are articulating them. So sometimes a sample size of one can be really illuminating when you have one customer or prospect who says something in such a way that it resonates with you, and you're like, oh, I bet other people are experiencing this too, but the way they framed it, helps you understand it. So that's why I think qualitative is as important as quantitative when you're trying to understand, those pain points.
Yeah, it's interesting. At KWSM, when we put together our lead generation strategies for clients, we
Yeah.
interview customers. And often, what business owners will tell us is important to their target audience or what the selling points for their business are very different than what we uncover when we talk to their customers and say, what really helped you make the decision to work with this company?
Yeah, exactly.
I think one of the reasons research is important is there are a lot of blind spots, right? When we're talking about our own products and services and companies.
Yep, exactly.
And
Um,
listening to Jeffrey just reminds me of there can be things that you're presenting in the data that resonate with your CEO or whoever you're presenting to, and there's going to be things they push back on. How do you effectively tell the story of things that they may not exactly like to hear? I think that's a key thing to think about.
Yeah, no, that's important. Are there tips, Tony? I know this wasn't something we talked about beforehand, but tell me about if I'm on a leadership team and I have to talk to my CEO about why research is important to move a certain initiative forward. What kinds of things can I talk about the value of research?
To me, it's a bit of a funny question. Um, I can't tell you how often I go to meetings with startups and private equity people, and I hear all these pitches. And the question always comes up: did you do your research? How well do you know your customer? How well do you know your audience?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the answer is we should do that. We should think about that. We should budget for that. So that's what I push back to the C-suite, who's maybe not allocating enough budget. Well, your competitors are out there. They're trying to understand what people want, what they're willing to pay, all that kind of thing. So, do you want to measure up, or do you want to follow your gut?
Yeah, I mean, it's important. It's an important part of strategy, marketing strategy, because otherwise we're just guessing and doing stuff rather than really understanding our audience and what's important to them and what they're looking for. Let's talk a little bit, Tony, about developing effective messaging. How can businesses use surveys to test different marketing messages, different concepts before they sort of dive in on those campaigns?
One thing I'm going to digress a little bit is I think the marketing message is key to test. If you are talking to a broad audience, you can do one concept at a time, what we internally would call monadic. If you're looking at a smaller sample size, you can randomize them. One of the things we do all the time is the message going to be the same for the whole United States or for the whole world? Or do you need to test the message regionally, by certain cities, by different other demographics, so that you're getting good data to segment the audience, not just one market message test?
Yeah, I think that's important for marketing in general is you can't run the same campaign to all audiences, right? Certain segments care about different things. And I think what you're saying is rather than me determining what that is for my audience, we can actually do research that allows us to test different aspects of our marketing messages to be able to dial those in and have more effective campaigns.
I always liked the Derek Jeter, who was on the New York Yankees. They asked him, what do you think is going to happen? And he said, that's why we play the game. You don't want to predict based on what a star player thinks or what the CEO thinks. You want to predict on data that you have of the people who are going to buy this or potentially going to buy this or invest in it or what have you.
Yeah, I think that's a hard truth for some CEOs, right? We think we know about our businesses and our customers. Um, but not only testing existing products and services and ideas and concepts, you can also use research to discover new market opportunities, right? How can we use surveys to sort of identify emerging trends or areas we might want to move into?
So
Either one of you, Tony.
there's a couple of things. I think of, I've talked to a bunch of 30-somethings, and they say, we like to get in our pajamas early and watch Jeopardy, which demographically you wouldn't think makes sense. So what are
Right.
some unusual case studies? What are some unusual audiences? What are segments that are going for your product, buying your product that you wouldn't think of? Jeffrey and I have talked about a swimwear company, a commerce company, and they had that CEO vision of this is who our customer is, and it didn't align with the data. And we see that all the time, that the engineers have built something that they think is cool and will be used for this purpose. So the research can help you uncover what are the actual uses, what are uses that you didn't think of, what are pain points that you didn't think of. Because if you're developing something, you know how cool it is, you know what it works for, you know what you think it should be, but that's not always the case.
What I love about the swimwear company is because they're an e-commerce company, so they have interesting data, but they hadn't done surveys before. So like the customers that you've talked to, Katie, they had a vision of who their customers were, and so when we did the survey first, about a quarter of the respondents, this was their own customer list that we were surveying, a quarter of their respondents were 65 and up. And they were like, something's wrong. I don't understand why the sample is so old. This is not who our customers are. Our customers are, moms, swim teams. Let's redo it. So we reran it and found the exact same thing. And because they'd never collected any demographic information, they didn't realize that a quarter of their business was, the swim aerobics. Swim aerobics for seniors was a huge component of their business. They had no visibility to, there was nothing on their website calling out, buying swimsuits for swim aerobics or anything like that. And it was just, not having done some basic demographic research about their customers, having their expectations in their head about who they were targeting. And so they thought, therefore, well, we're targeting those people. That's therefore who our customers are.
Yeah, and the first thing that my marketing brain does when you tell me that story is think, oh, what a missed opportunity, right? To be marketing to that segment. I mean, it's a revenue stream that they weren't capitalizing on because it didn't occur to them that that could be an audience.
Yep.
How often do you guys do research and it comes back like that it's something we didn't expect or didn't see coming?
Often enough that we have a different methodology for presenting the results.
Oh, tell me.
If you like normally, if the results come back and they're close to what people expect, then we go through the key findings, and the highlights. But if we know the results are a surprise, then we have to step back and we have to go through the methodology. We have to really kind of build it up. Here's who we surveyed. Here's what the questions were. Okay, here's what we found. Because otherwise, the human reaction is, well, that can't be right. You talk to the wrong people, or maybe the questions were they come up with rationalizations because this information is such unusual, so shocking to their worldview. So when that happens, like I said, we're very deliberate about introducing it. And like a lot of times we'll lead with conclusions. With that style presentation, we don't lead with conclusions. We just build fact by fact and then kind of end with the conclusion after by the time we end with the conclusion, they know where we're going because they've seen us build it, case by case. But, it's just a different type of deliverable in that circumstance. Yeah.
Well, and I have to know, did the swimwear company act on that research? Did they change their approach?
Yeah, they did. Yeah. Yep.
Excellent. So you're responsible for business growth, I bet. That's excellent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jeffrey, tell me a little bit about some strategies we could use in market research when we're exploring new products or services. Are there certain tactics you want to employ?
So new products and services, a lot of times they come from unusual use cases. So people using a solution in a way that was not the primary intent. So really kind of understand. So I think it's important sometimes to look for those, like our water aerobics, to look for those places where you have people using your software or services, products or services in a manner that surprising to you, because you probably weren't marketing it for that use, but there's a real lesson there that it's solving a need that you hadn't anticipated. So those unusual uses can be really, really valuable. And then, we talked about pain points. So, drilling down on pain points to see, if you can make those pain points go away, what are the new products and services that result from that, or the new configurations? One of the things we talked about with Katie in our own business is most of our competitors, you have to request a quote. And we're very transparent. You want to survey 1,000 US adults, it's $5,995. Here it is. We've removed a pain point that we heard from prospects, which is they wanted to do more of the sales research themselves before reaching us, and so we gave them more information up front.
Yeah, I think sometimes it can be candidly surprising for people how expensive research is, how time consuming it is. Like there can be even some pain points in the research process for those of us marketers who want to use more data, but think it's prohibitive in some way. And I know that's something you're trying to solve with ResearchScape.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the type of research. The narrower the audience, the more expensive it is. If you want to talk to IT directors, that's very expensive as opposed to if you're going to research consumers. But you can research consumers very affordably. So if you just had 5 questions for 1,000 consumers, that's $1,000. So hopefully there's a solution that scales, and that's part of the reason why, when we were doing our own research, we basically hit multiple price points. We give people a menu. We're not trying to shake people upside down for every penny they have. Here's, our standard offerings with the standard solutions. So whether you're a small business or a large business, you can find something that works for you.
Yeah, and talk a little bit about your methodology. If I'm doing a digital strategy and I want to survey 1,000 consumers, like how does that happen?
Yeah, so typically, in this hypothetical, are you doing that for so you're doing that for lead generation, right? Is it something you want to have them have say B2B prospects download to learn what others think, or is it to inform the services? Tell me a little bit about your hypothetical.
Well, I'm making my hypothetical up, so let me think. Let's talk about it both ways. First, let's talk about I have a product that I'm trying to market, I'm trying to drive sales for, and I need to know how people feel about this product.
Yep. So we'll do product concept tests where we'll describe the concept, give key facts about it, then have them rate. We'll ask qualitative questions. What do they think of it? What's unique about it? And then have them sort of rank what's important to them to kind of figure out those segments. And for something like that concept test, we're typically also doing a price test. What's the most you're willing to pay? And we may be doing a messaging test. Maybe, marketing has 3 ideas that they want to lead with. And so we'll do a marketing test. As Tony said, it might be monadic. We show people 1 if we have a large sample size, or if it's a small B2B sample, we might show them 1 of 3 in random order. So they just see them in a different order and rate each of them. So that's a way to get a lot of information to help with the launch. Product launches are obviously the most challenging thing that any business does in terms of obstacles to success. So the more information you can get up front, the more successful your launch will be.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do the other hypothetical now. If I have a B2B scenario and I want to know how people feel about a specific service offering or whether there's an opportunity, is that different?
Well, the B2B offering that I was thinking of from a lead generation perspective is a lot of times B2B software companies, B2B professional services companies, they're like, well, what can we give people to capture their name so that, and so letting people know what others are thinking about. So right now I can tell you, almost every survey we do, regardless of the industry, there's questions about AI, AI in healthcare, AI in HR, AI in IT. And so everybody's interested in, well, what do my peers think about using artificial intelligence in different ways, and how are they using it? And so for that, we'll typically brainstorm the headlines that you'd love to see come out of the research, maybe a stat you want to own or something you think would really resonate with journalists. So we'll brainstorm the headlines. We'll then write a questionnaire that's going to be neutral but support those headlines. And then we'll do a soft launch. So for that consumer study, we'll launch it to 100 people. We'll pause, create a dashboard with the results. With 100 people, the margin of error is plus or minus 10% for 9 out of 10 questions. And we'll give you a chance to sort of see, are my headlines here? And if not, we'll change some questions around. Maybe some of the results are surprising, so we add some follow-up questions. And then we'll fully launch to get the full 1,000 results, which is the typical number for consumer surveys that get published, so that you can get sort of the headlines and the findings that you can then share as a PDF or PowerPoint with your prospects.
So in this case, I'm using survey output, survey data as thought leadership for my own business to help me in the sales process. Yes,
thought leadership, and most people put that behind a lead generation form, but not everybody does. Some people just want the thought leadership. So it's on their website for anyone to see. Yeah.
Wow. Well, brilliant. There may or may not be a survey like that on the KWSM website, but we can talk about that later. But I do think that that's really valuable. One of the ways we work with our clients is positioning them as thought leaders in the field. And I think it is really valuable to showcase the fact that you have your pulse on the happenings in your industry and how your customer segment feels about things. So those type market research surveys are amazing lead generation magnets when we create those campaigns. So I'm a proponent of that. Actually, I've worked with you in both ways. We've done product surveys as well for our clients, haven't we?
Yep.
So I guess I'm just a ResearchScape fan. That's okay. But today I've had new ideas because we know we talk about it when we're launching a product or when we want to have the thought leadership research or when we have a new initiative. But really, isn't there another use case for surveys that maybe you're so comfortable in your business, you need to survey to gut check and make sure you're still on the same path, right? It's like the swimwear example. Like, is there something we're missing about the demographic we're serving or how people are responding or using our product or service? Is it a good idea to do research just on a regular basis?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think a lot of times people think about research as we want to measure, we want to measure how satisfied our customers are in aggregate. But you can use, customer experience research to intervene to improve satisfaction. So, I mean, if you travel, you get the survey afterwards, about your flight. You get the survey about the hotel that you stayed at. So those are called transactional surveys. How was this particular experience? But the value of a transactional survey is if someone's not happy, you can reach out to them to figure out what was wrong and if you can, take steps to improve it. So it's not just about understanding your score in that case. It's about, you didn't realize that this customer was unhappy. So when we do customer satisfaction surveys for our client, we program an alert. If there's low ratings on certain questions, an email immediately fires off to a customer service team, or in some cases even to the president or owner of the company, because they want to make sure that they're immediately taking action. So you definitely don't have to think about it as in the abstract. I mean, customer satisfaction are the people who work with you happy? And if they're not, what can you do to make them happy?
Yeah. Do you have any stories about surprising outcomes there? Like, when you do customer satisfaction surveys, you expect some things that you could improve, but any stories about somebody who found something they weren't expecting and had to take business action about it?
So oftentimes it's an issue that people that maybe should have been escalated internally. So times where the senior management is surprised because they thought an issue was under control and it wasn't. Whether the team was trying to solve it without letting their boss's boss know, but so that kind of visibility to issues that people didn't realize were going on. There's also often a big disconnect. We do a lot of software as a service work, and there's often a big disconnect for the person who buys the software or renews it every year and the users. So the users often have lower opinions of the software that was chosen for them, and what it does or doesn't do. And so that disconnect, will show the results by role. Are they the approver, the decision maker, or are they a daily user? And there's interesting lessons there, because today's daily user, might get promoted and replace the current decision maker if that decision maker changes jobs or whatever. So you definitely want to be aware of that dynamic within your customer base.
Yeah, two different feelings. What are some best practices for using customer insights to create a more customer-centric approach in your business?
Yeah, so one of the things that we think about is, again, I talked about it's not enough for someone to tell you something is important, because many things are important. And so one of the things that we'll do is we'll say, well, overall, how satisfied are you? And then how satisfied are you with each of the following? And so we might give them 7 or 8 items. It could be things like timeliness, account management, technical support, customer service, whatever the key attributes are. Some of them might be like those that work for professional services. Others might be for, product specific features. So we have them rate all of these. And then what we do is look for a pattern between their overall rating and each of these items. And what we're looking for is, if they rate, say they timeliness, say if they rate timeliness, that they're not satisfied with it, but it doesn't affect their overall rating, then timeliness really isn't that important. So we derive the importance of the items by how much they predict the overall rating. So we call that a key driver analysis, some math that we do, but it can really help pull out the things that might be lip service. So one of the things we find, I talked about price conscious segments. Usually, like in our smartphone survey, price really doesn't affect your current satisfaction. Whatever you paid for it, even if you're now paying it on a monthly basis, that was a decision, in the past. And the price of the phone really isn't governing how satisfied you are with the phone. It's battery life, it's camera, things that you might not have always thought about. So that derived importance can really help you determine what people actually value. They're not telling, again, going beyond just having them tell you what's important, but looking for, what's actually driving their overall ratings.
Yeah, because most people would say price is important.
Yeah.
But then to your point, once they have it, it's not affecting their level of satisfaction or not.
Right.
This may be an unfair question, is there a science to the order you ask about those factors, the order you put them?
Yeah, there's 2 different approaches on that one, for instance. If you put overall SAT first, you're getting their more top of mind judgment. And we'll do that a lot in consumer products, low engagement products. If you put it at the end, after they've rated everything, then that can be better for more rational decisions, B2B decisions. So, if you're rating, a product that you bought at the store, it's a different purchase, right? There's a lot of impulse there. But, a B2B decision, which is high ticket item, maybe there's 3 or 4 people who make the decision, that's more deliberate. And so asking it at the end, they've then thought through these items before they assign that final rating. So it can be a difference in terms of many of those effects, can impact ratings. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine if I have to think through the individual things before I tell you about overall satisfaction, my satisfaction score might be a smidge lower because I've now had to consider all of these things.
Yep.
Is that potentially more accurate than if I just start with, yeah, I'm happy, and then I really dig into the thing?
Well, again, it depends on the category. So if it's a category that's deliberate, then yes, that's more accurate. If it's a category that's impulsive, then it's less accurate.
Are all things less accurate when we're impulsive? That's good.
Probably.
Probably. I've bought a lot of things that I might not be that happy with, but I got an Instagram ad, so
There you go.
things happen. Okay, let's move on to a big question in people's minds, which is marketing ROI. This is something I talk about with my clients quite a bit, right? And I want to know how businesses can gather data that actually demonstrates the value of their marketing investments. How are we using surveys and customer insights to show the value of what you've spent on your marketing campaigns?
So that is a really hard thing to do. So we often get asked to use surveys around brand awareness. So client becomes a sponsor of Major League Baseball. They weren't a sponsor before. They're sponsoring a local team. They're going to have their ads behind home plate. they want to see, are people aware of them at the end? So you got to measure it before, and then you have to measure it at the end. Well, the tough thing whenever we get these brand awareness projects is it's really hard to move brand awareness. So we'll do it, and then we'll do it at the end, and people will be like, well, it didn't change. It's really
Uh-oh.
hard to move brand awareness in in a way that's detectable through surveys. So a lot of times instead, because we'll do like test markets, control markets, radio ads in some markets and not in others. There's times where tracking the IP addresses that hit your website geographically. Okay, did you now see a disproportionate lift in the market for the team you're supporting? Versus other metropolitan markets. So there's times you really have to look to other data besides just the survey to prove out some of those things.
Yeah, when I think about measuring brand awareness, that's a long-term play, right? Brand awareness doesn't happen in a few hours. It happens over months and sometimes years. And so maybe there's a cadence in which that might be better if you surveyed this time, year over year or something. Would that be more effective, you think?
We do recommend more of an annual cadence than necessarily before a campaign and after a campaign, because even if you've saturated a metropolitan area, certain radio stations, that's still a subset of the people in that metropolitan area. So it's really hard to prove that from a market research standpoint, where you're trying to survey a representative sample. Like I said, it might be easier to measure in other ways, whether it's the website or, hey, put in this discount code when you go to our form, which often they'll say on the radio or on podcasts, so measure those discount codes, for instance, is another technique that can be more effective than surveys.
Yeah, that direct response where you use a certain phone number that they can call in and it came from that radio ad or that sort of thing. We do that with our clients, but back to something you said earlier, a lot of times when we're measuring that ROI, it's looking at, did you see an influx in website traffic from a certain geographic area or a demographic area? We have IP detection on all our clients' websites. Can we tell what companies visited their website, and was that tied to whatever initiative we had? So some of the shorter term things are, what was the immediate action? But I think that customer sentiment that we're measuring through research is more of a long-term play, because, even if you raise brand awareness for 10 minutes, what does that get you long-term, right? You have to cement it in customers' hearts and minds for a longer term for it to really have a business effect in my mind.
Exactly.
Yeah. Tony, I'm going to ask for questions from the audience, but I'm also going to ask you to start thinking. I know that you're interfacing with a lot of ResearchScape customers, and I'd like us to talk about sort of some case studies about how we use research in a meaningful way for marketing. How do we get more insights about who we're serving or our products and services, or even that ROI piece? So I know you share those stories every day in your work. So if you'll think about those. And those of you joining us, we have several people on the call, many people. If you will use the Q&A box to ask us questions, I'm going to pivot to questions from the audience, from all of you, in just a few minutes. And this is fascinating for me, because research is such a big part of what we do when we design our strategies for clients. And so in marketing, it's quite a big push for customer insights. But what other types of initiatives do you guys support, Jeffrey? Is it all marketing related, or are there more business cases that marketing or that research supports?
Yeah, so we do employee satisfaction surveys, which, in times of low unemployment, there's a cyclical nature to that. People care more in times of low unemployment about employee satisfaction. So we'll do employee satisfaction research, the transactional customer experience surveys, to make sure that they're intervening to improve the customer experience, strategic customer satisfaction, annual tracking studies. Lots of different types of market research, some of which we touched on: concept tests, pricing tests, messaging tests. And then the newsmaker surveys, where you're doing the survey because you want to publish it and be a thought leader, get some attention for your organization. So lots of surveys.
Because you're using that as content. That's one of my favorite things to use research for. But also, I mean, you and I have done projects together where we're testing pricing for some of our customers' products. And we've had a scenario where that didn't go over with the customer very well. They thought they could charge a lot more for their product than it turns out they could. And I think those are really hard conversations to have. And we touched on this earlier that sometimes customers don't want to hear what the research says, or CEOs don't want to hear what the research says. Are there ever scenarios where you do have to take a different approach as far as redoing research or testing in a different way or asking different questions just to validate that?
Well, the nice thing with e-commerce is that there are certain questions that if you don't believe the survey data, then you can run tests in your store. Many people have realized that the price that Amazon is showing them for a product is not necessarily the same price it's showing someone else. So you can certainly do some direct experimentation, and many businesses that in the past did not, have e-commerce now do. So I love surveys, but I'm always the first to say, in this case, here's what the survey will get you. And, here, maybe you want to think about some other methods. I will say, in terms of having to deliver bad news, the pricing one is one we often have to deliver bad news on. People often think that there's a high price. Part of that is because in a survey, it's hard to get all of the intangibles about why am I going to want to spend, this amount of money on this product or service when I'm just reading about it. I'm not going through all the steps that I would, in a sales process, right? So I'm sure we all have experiences where we spent far more money on something than we expected, because once we went through the process, we were like, oh, okay, I see what the benefits are from this. I'm thinking of my own life, windows for my house, a mini fridge for the outside kitchen that was far more expensive than I thought. But once you actually go through so if you'd surveyed me about those, I would have given you lower answers than I ended up spending.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, that was the gutters on my house. They're going to cost what? But, very helpful, very helpful. Glad we did it. So my satisfaction now might be a little higher than I would have indicated in a survey pre-purchase.
Right.
And I imagine that is also true, that the data is skewed by whether somebody has made the purchase yet or not. How we think we feel about something may be different than how we actually feel once we have used the product or service.
Yeah, that's the challenge with concept tests is people often, especially if it's early in a category, people have a tough time envisioning, well, how am I going to use this product or service? Or, it's not something that I need. So so that can be difficult to overcome in a quick survey. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Tony, any anecdotal stories we want to talk about related to research and how it's helped the businesses you work with?
I just wanted to weigh in real quick on the ROI cadence, because one of the things that really resonated with me is I was talking to a CMO of a brand who all of us have in their house. And they said, we can never know enough about our customers, and their lives are changing all the time. So again, that's why we have to do the research. And maybe your cadence of your life doesn't change every year. You move, you change jobs, you add to your family. You and I have talked about you add a pet. All sorts of things can change in that time. So keep it current and keep going.
Well, I also wouldn't say we're in a time of no change in our world in general, right? Seems to be a bit of that happening these days. And so I'm a big believer that even the outside environment, what's happening geopolitically or industry-wide, can affect our customers. And so I think this is a particularly interesting time to be surveying and gathering those insights, because things are changing quickly in our world, and how business owners are and leaders are responding to that can change on a daily or weekly basis. But
around case studies, when I was in San Diego, when we met in person, I presented a case study around a concept test. It's an electric fence that you wear on your belt so that your dog stays within a certain radius of you walking in public if they're off leash. And this the study was based around, okay, we have this new technology, how do we talk about it? And the survey that Jeffrey designed was around a national audience, a regional audience, and a local audience in certain urban locations. What's the most fun place to walk your dog where you live? And this is a prompt I throw out to audiences all the time is, what do you think people like to talk about most? And I get, sometimes people shout out a politician's name, which is a joke. They'll say kids, but kids are private and there's concerns there. And pets is the #1 thing that people want to talk about. And
Yeah.
so that study garnered tremendous attention for our client's client around, there's this really cool technology for people who like walking their dogs, and they've shared their opinion about what's the most fun place to walk their dog, where they live, whether it's Spokane or Chicago or rural Kansas.
Yeah. I wish I'd been in that survey. As you know, I have 6 dogs and I would love to have that product, right? So they'd all like be the dog whisperer. They could stay with me. But I also have friends who hope they're coming out with a kid version sometime soon because I could see them trying to corral their kids that way too. But yeah, I mean, topic has to influence how much response you get, right? Do you ever do surveys where people don't give you answers, that they're not as engaged?
So we did a survey that we were convinced, was there a technical issue? Because we invited all these people and we had no one take the survey. Can you guess what the topic was?
Taxes.
Tell us about your last dental visit.
That's worse than taxes.
Yeah, it was working fine. No one wanted to take that survey. So it literally, the first mailing had a 0% response rate. That's the only time in my entire career I've seen that. So we increased the incentive and, did some things to be able to do that, because it was not on behalf of your local dentist, right? It was, it was a nationwide study. The highest response rate to a consumer study was on gourmet dog food. People who, this was their customer list of very happy customers who bought gourmet dog food for their dogs. So
yes. Okay. Excellent. Excellent. So dogs win over the dentist. I love that you have to incentivize people to take the survey, but that's a real thing, right? I mean, people want to know what they're getting for their time, even if it only takes a couple of minutes.
yeah, and so your survey on canines depends which type of canine it is. Sorry.
There you go. Yeah, that's brilliant. I didn't put that together. All right. Gentlemen, we have a couple of questions coming in here. The first is a nuts and bolts one, so we'll answer that first. It says, will we be receiving a recording of this session? Yes, you will. We're going to email out this webinar in its entirety in the next few days sometime, so stand by. But yes, if you've registered today, we will send you the recording. And certainly we'd love for you to watch it, share it with your friends, put it on social media. I don't know, instead of Netflix, enjoy it in the evening. All right, next question here is, tell me about some common mistakes that business owners make when trying to understand their target audience. Either of you have insight on that?
Again, there's these artifacts of how people take surveys. So have you ever been asked in a survey, hey, Katie, how likely are you to recommend us on a scale from 0 to 10?
Yes, all the time.
Yeah, so that's called the Net Promoter Score. And many organizations not only ask that question, they then incentivize their staff based on the answers. Have you had someone tell you, hey, can you give us a 9 or a 10 on that survey? Or on a different survey, can you give us a 5?
Yes, at the rent-a-car place.
Yeah, at the rent-a-car place, right? So, so incentivizing staff on surveys makes the surveys irrelevant, because you've now just encouraged them to have people, engage in that type of behavior. So, so that's a mistake that people make. But also that question, that 0 to 10 question, the Net Promoter Score, it was pretty popular for a while, but it's really not very, reliable. People have figured out lots of ways to game it because of incentives. Like, do you think it would be better to send an invite and 3 reminders if you wanted a higher NPS score, or just send 1 invite and report the results that you got in the first couple hours? Which do you think is going to give you a higher score?
Probably the reminders are going to get you more responses, right?
They're going to get you a lower score because the people who were less engaged are going to finally take the survey. The people who come in those first couple hours, they're your fans. They're like, hey, I got to tell you how great you did. So, so you need to send reminders to get people to take it. In our own customer stat survey, so there's a whole science that would say if this was a consumer survey, and maybe you've had the phone call from Nielsen or another firm where they keep calling, day after day. That's because they're encouraged to make at least 6 or 7 contacts. Now we do an invited to reminders because these are our customers. And so we say on the second one, we're like, Pew Research would have us contact you 6 times. This is the last reminder. Please take our survey. So you're going to get more accurate results when you do those additional reaches out, but you're going to have lower scores because you're going to get some of the people who were less satisfied who were like, you know what, I'm going to tell you about my mediocre experience that I wasn't going to tell you about before.
But when we talk about ROI, you kind of need those mediocre responses, right? I want to know about the problems because that's how you get the value out of the research. I'm not paying for research just to know everyone loves me.
Exactly. It's how you improve. It's how you figure out where there are places that you can invest in to provide better service. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The mistake I like to talk about is reframing this. Jeffrey said when I first met him, approach each study with empathy, humility, and curiosity, as opposed to not something that we did at ResearchGate, but something I read about. A whole ad campaign was built, and then a study was done to see if it resonated, and it didn't. The features were mismatched, and the benefits were mismatched with consumer responses. So don't spend a lot of money and then see if the research validates your conclusion. That's a mistake.
Yeah, so research needs to be the pre-work, not just the checking our boxes at the end. Yeah. All right, I like that. Mistakes. Okay, let me check our box here. Yes. Okay. How can businesses use surveys to measure the impact of customer experience on their key business metrics?
So one of the things that I like to talk about, there's been a lot of talk about big data. So I want to share a case study that's little data. And from a computer standpoint, little data is a binary digit, a 0 or a 1. So we did a study in the healthcare marketplace. So in the healthcare marketplace, people buying health insurance for themselves. Every year, there's an open window to buy that. So we surveyed a health insurer's customers in the 6 weeks up to that time frame. And then after the survey was done and after the open enrollment period ended, the health insurer provided us a 0 or a 1. A 0, they did not renew. A 1, they renewed. And then we reran the study against that data to say, okay, here were the answers that predicted that you were going to lose this customer. And then from that, it was a longer survey than we usually field. It was maybe 30 or 40 questions. From that, we came out with like the 4 most important questions that they were then going to embed in other surveys that they did so that they could intervene to improve the likelihood of retaining a customer during open enrollment. So, so having real world behavioral data, which I think I guess has been a message I've been kind of consistent about today as we've talked, is an important adjunct to surveys, right? You really want to be able to tie it back into behavior, and it doesn't have to be complicated to do.
Okay. All right. I like that. And then Jeffrey, I'm remembering that recently, I think you had a workshop or something about helping people formulate the questions. Like, how do I structure survey questions? What are the best practices there? Can you talk a little bit about how we should approach? Let's say I'm just going to do some research on my own and send a survey out to my clients. What are the best practices for how I should ask the questions?
Yeah, so we want you to think about who's the right people to qualify for the survey. So we'll invite people to qualify, but sometimes their circumstances have changed. Maybe they've changed departments. Maybe you wanted to survey small businesses and now they work for a big business. So just those questions to make sure they qualify so that you can be accurate about who's coming in. And then typically we want you to think sort of the 3 to 5 major topics that you want to cover. And those are going to be the key sections. Sometimes we'll get a questionnaire that someone's written and it's clear that different people just went and added questions into this document. There's no rhyme or reason to it. There's no conversational flow. By kind of thinking about your 3 to 5 topics and bucketing your questions, you're going to immediately have more of a conversational flow. And then in terms of brainstorming your headlines, like, is there a stat your business would love to own? Maybe it's a stat that you quote, Aberdeen or Gartner or someone else on today. And if you could have one specific to your industry, you'd love to be able to quote that. Or maybe it's something else that you haven't found the data on. Do you know that your prospects have questions that haven't been answered with data? Those would be also, good things to think about. Writing. And then finally, how do you want to compare and contrast? Do you want to compare on a B2B side by size of company, by industry, by seniority level? On a consumer side, are you comparing by household income, by region? So think about, how you want to compare and contrast the audiences so that you can have those questions. So I have had early in our history, we would often come in on surveys that had already been done. And sometimes people would be like, I want to understand the urban-rural divide. I'm like, that's great. You didn't ask that question. We don't know. We don't have their zip code. We can't estimate it. We don't know. You didn't ask them if they live in an urban, suburban, or rural setting. So, we can't categorize by that. So thinking through those things that I just covered, that's a good way to make sure your questionnaire is going to help you achieve your objectives.
Okay.
But actually, if you go to my blog at researchscape.com, that's the most recent blog. The February blog post is on that topic.
Oh, it is? Oh, I'm psychic. Okay, great.
I would add,
Go ahead,
Jeffrey,
Tony.
me over time, we've done a lot of association work, and they want to learn something. So the first question is, what could we as an association do to better serve you? Open-ended question. You can fill in a paragraph. But you have to bring people in. You have to lure, coax them, give them some easy questions. If you lead off the big open-ended question, they're going to say, I have another email to respond to. I have a meeting in 10 minutes. And they'll abandon right away. So again, humility, empathy, curiosity, show them that you're interested in what they're learning rather than hitting them with the big question right away.
Yeah, it seems a little aggressive, right? Asking me to write an essay on the first response. So, so you're saying ask some rank these things, pick this or this, easy questions, and then ask them to write the free form ones.
Ease them into it.
Ease them into it. Right. Speaking of easing into it, let's say I'm a CEO or business leader on this call today, and we've talked about a lot of different ways to use research, but I've never done research in my company before. What's sort of the place to start? Is there an easy way that every company should do this survey? Maybe not this specific survey, but this part of their business that they should look at first? How do I start using research in my business?
Yeah, I would think a customer satisfaction study. Every organization should do at least an annual customer satisfaction study. I don't care what size you are or how many employees you have. I think that, there are organizations that want to do that at a higher cadence, but I think everybody should at least do that, annually, because we all have preconceptions. Maybe the CEO came up through the technical support organization or through the sales organization, more likely, and so has a certain expectation of customers based on tenure and time spent, but customers have changed. So I think it's always important to hear from customers in the moment, what's important to them, what their attitudes are now, how they're reacting to changes in the organization that might that the organization itself might not realize have been a big deal for customers. So, and the great news is that you have the list of those customers. We'll often do, for smaller companies, we'll often do an online survey and then telephone outreach. We've got a great call center we work with in St. Louis that will have executive interviewers call these folks. Sometimes just getting that call, person nobody answers their phone. So they'll take the online survey, or other times they will, just take it while talking to someone. So customer sat, that's the way to start.
Okay. Oh, I have a bunch of follow-up questions. So first of all, when you're doing customer satisfaction, should you send it to past customers as well, or just current engaged customers?
So I love doing past customer research. The problem is they've moved on. Those have we talked about different response rates. Those have a very low response rate, right? Part of the and when we talk about the NPS people, the people who love you answering right away, is that human behavior. There's this, social connection. So the social norms govern a lot of these surveys. A lot of the surveys you've taken, you haven't been given incentives for, the airline flight, the hotel, or whatever. You're answering because you fly that airline all the time and you wanted them to know how they did so they'll improve. The past customers, they've moved on. They don't care anymore. So, so it's much harder to get them to take the survey.
Okay. And then how important is it that the survey is anonymous, or should we know what customers are saying what?
So most of the surveys that we do have to be anonymous. There's a code of ethics that the Insights Association that we're members of has us follow. The exception is customer surveys. So customer surveys, you can say, look, typically we'll give them an option. Would you like someone to follow up with your answers? Would you like the answers to be associated with you or not? Most of I'm sure many of those surveys, like the hotel surveys and the travel surveys, when we run those, they're tied into your CRM ID in the system. So they're asking because they're going to measure you. They're going to take the survey and put in all this other data they have. How often you fly, how much you spend. They're going to analyze all that in addition. So typically, customer surveys are bringing all of the data that they can to them.
Well, I think that's interesting because if I was going to do a customer survey, I imagine of my current customers, I imagine I might get more honest answers if I made it anonymous, so they didn't have to tell me who it was, right? And I wonder if that also takes out some bias, because sometimes I think we get an answer that we don't like from a customer that maybe isn't our biggest or isn't an ideal customer. Is there the tendency to discount that answer, even though it could be valuable?
Oh, sure. I've definitely presented and had people say that was so-and-so.
Bob said that. Pay no attention.
Especially for some of the professional services companies, this was, this was that account. Oh, okay. Yeah, we know that we have problems with that account, or that account has some unusual circumstances. So there are times where that kind of thing gets just dismissed because of who's saying it.
But it doesn't make it less true necessarily. So maybe there's also value in those responses you don't want to see. Right? Okay. Well, gentlemen, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for chatting with me today. Any final thoughts before we wrap up and tell people how they can get a hold of you?
No, this is great, Katie. Thank you.
Yeah. And Jeffrey, if somebody now wants to start with their research journey, tell them the best way to get a hold of you to start talking about how to do that.
Yeah, if you go to researchscape.com, you can reach out to us on our contact page. We've got a toll-free number. You can email us, whatever makes sense. I'll just put that in the chat.
Okay, excellent. And I know you spend a lot of time on your blog posts too, so there's a lot of good information about research in general and market insights on that blog. So that might be a good place for people to start too.
Yeah. We try to answer common questions on our blog. So I encourage you, like I said, the one we talked about is there, but also it's there to answer people's common questions about doing research. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. You are going to get a recording of this webinar, and we'll send it out via email in the next few days. And I encourage you to reach out to my friends at ResearchScape, and also to me if you have marketing questions. Happy to talk about customer insights that way as well. All right. Good to see you guys. Talk to you soon.